Hare Krishna, my friends. Welcome to Bhaktiville. Here we are, Friday night, Bhaktiville, Nectar of Devotion. Tonight we continue our deep dive into the Nectar of Devotion. We've been reading about the various rasas, or relationships, one can have with Lord Krishna. Tonight, we're reading about the parental rasa. We're on page 347 of the book, or page 385 of the PDF. Also tonight, we're meeting at our Panchatattva Mandir. Joining us also are Bhakti Mimulus and Bhakti Greece, and maybe a couple of other guests I've been chatting with, so they may also come here tonight. So before I get started, let me offer my obeisances. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane. I offer my respectful obeisances under His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is very dear to Lord Krishna, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripasindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. I also offer my respectful obeisances unto the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees and can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen, conditioned souls. All right, so here we go. Parental Rasa. Srila Prabhupada titles this chapter 43, Parenthood. Before I get started, though, I want you to notice that I've put up a little slide here in the temple over to my left, in the corner there, of the three major ages of Krishna. And I made this slide because Srila Prabhupada references this a lot in this reading. So Kumara is 0 to 5 years old, Mukunda is 6 to 10 years old, and Kaishora is 11 to 15 years old. And then at 16, he moves away. He goes to Mathura to fight Kamsa, and from there he goes on to Dwarka. So he doesn't, there are no more childhood pastimes. So parenthood, here we go. When ecstatic love develops into the relationship of parenthood and becomes steadily established, the relationship is called Vatsalya Rasa. That's the Sanskrit name for parenthood, or this rasa. The exhibition of this Vatsalya Rasa, standard of devotional service, can be found in the dealings of Krishna with his devotees who represent themselves as superior personalities, like father, mother, teacher, etc. Learned scholars have described the impetus of parental love for Krishna, existing in the elderly personalities who are in relation with him as follows, quote, "The Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose bodily complexion is just like a bluish, new-grown lotus flower, whose body is very delicate, and whose lotus eyes are surrounded by scattered hair as black as bees, was walking on the streets of Vrindavan when Mother Yashoda, the beloved wife of Nanda Maharaj, saw him. Immediately the milk began to flow from her breasts, soaking her body." End quote. Some specific provocations for parental love of Krishna are listed as his blackish bodily hue, which is very attractive and pleasing to see, his all-auspicious bodily features, his mildness, his sweet words, his simplicity, his shyness, his humility, his constant readiness to offer respect to the elderly, and his charity. All of these qualities are considered ecstatic provocations for parental love. I wanted to make a little side note here about this flowing of breast milk. So when women are breastfeeding, there's this moment called letting down, and the milk just flows. Hare Krishna Kandita, and the milk flows through the breast. And it can happen when the baby's there. It can happen when the baby's not there. You'll think about the baby and letting down happens, and all of a sudden your shirt is soaked. So this is what's happening with Mother Yashoda and others. So just to let you know the mechanics of that. All right, continuing with our text. Kandita Haribo, we're on page 347, chapter 43 on parenthood. Hare Krishna. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 8th chapter, 35th verse, it is stated by Shukadeva Goswami that Mother Yashoda accepted Lord Krishna as her son. Although he is accepted in the Vedas as the king of heaven, in the Upanishads as the impersonal Brahman, and in philosophy as the supreme male. By the yogis, he is accepted as the supersoul, and by the devotees as the supreme personality of Godhead. Once Mother Yashoda addressed one of her friends in this way, quote, Nanda Maharaj, the leader of the cowherdsmen, worshipped Lord Vishnu along with me, and as a result of this worshipping, Krishna has been saved from the clutches of Putana and other demons. The twin Arjuna trees were, of course, broken due to a strong wind, and although Krishna appeared to have lifted Govardhan Hill along with Balaram, I think that Nanda Maharaj actually held the mountain. Otherwise, how could it have been possible for a little boy to lift such a great hill? End quote. This is another example of ecstasy in parental love. This kind of parental love is generated in a devotee out of his conviction in love that he himself is superior to Krishna, and that without being taken care of by such devotee, Krishna could not possibly live. One devotee therefore prayed to the parents of Lord Krishna as follows, quote, Let me take shelter of the elderly parental devotees of Lord Krishna. They are always anxious to serve Krishna and to maintain him, and they are always so kind to him. Let us offer our respectful obeisances unto them for being so kind to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the parent of the whole universe. End quote. There is a similar prayer by a Brahmana who says, quote, Let others worship the Vedas and the Upanishads, and let others worship the Mahabharata, if they are afraid of material existence and want to become liberated from that condition. But as far as I am concerned, I wish only to worship Maharaj Nanda, because the Supreme Absolute Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is crawling in his courtyard as his own child. End quote. Following is a list of respectful personalities who enjoy parental affection toward Krishna. 1. Mother Yashoda, the Queen of Braj. 2. Maharaj Nanda, the King of Braj. 3. Mother Rohini, the mother of Balaram. 4. All the elderly gopis whose sons were taken away by Lord Brahma. 5. Devaki, the wife of Vasudeva. 6. The other 15 wives of Vasudeva. 7. Kunti, the mother of Arjuna. 8. Vasudeva, the real father of Krishna. And 9. Sandapani Muni, Krishna's teacher. All these are considered respectable elderly personalities with parental love for Krishna. This list is in order of superior importance, and thus we can see that Mother Yashoda and Maharaj Nanda are considered to be the supermost of all elderly personalities. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 9th chapter, 2nd verse, Shukadeva Goswami gives Maharaj Parikshit a description of the form and beauty of Mother Yashoda. He says, quote, My dear king, the wide hips of Mother Yashoda were surrounded by silk and linen clothes, and her breasts were flowing with milk because of her affection. When she was churning butter and tightly holding the rope, the bangles on her hands and earrings on her ears were moving, and from the nice decoration in her hair, the flowers were slackening and falling down. Due to her excessive labor, there were drops of perspiration on her face. End quote. There is another description of Mother Yashoda in a devotee's prayer. Quote, Let me be given protection by Mother Yashoda, whose curly hairs are bound with thread, whose hair is very brightly beautified by the vermilion placed in the part, and whose bodily frame derides all her ornaments. Her eyes are always engaged in seeing the face of Krishna, and thus they are always filled with tears. She has a complexion like the bluish lotus flower, which is enhanced in beauty by her dressing herself with many colorful garments. Let her merciful glance fall on all of us, so that we may be protected from the clutches of Maya and smoothly progress in our devotional service. End quote. There is the following description of Mother Yashoda's affection for Krishna. After rising early in the morning, Mother Yashoda first of all offered her breast milk to Krishna, and then she began to chant various mantras for his protection. Then she would decorate his forehead very nicely and bind his arms with protective talismans. By all of these activities, it is definitely understood that she is the emblem of all maternal affection for Krishna. The description of Nanda Maharaja's bodily features is as follows. The hairs on his head are generally black, but some of them are gray. There's a description that his hair is like sesame and rice, so it's gray. His garments are of greenish color, like the new grown leaves of a banyan tree. His belly is fatty. His complexion is exactly like the full moon, and he has a beautiful mustache. When Krishna was a baby, one day he was walking in the courtyard, capturing the finger of his father. Because he could not walk steadily, he appeared to be almost falling down. While Nanda Maharaj was giving protection to his transcendental son in this way, all of a sudden there were drops of tears in his eyes, and he became overwhelmed with joy. Let us all offer our respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of King Nanda. Childhood age, childish dress, movements by the child, sweet words spoken by the child, nice smiling, and various forms of childish play are considered provocations for increasing the parental love for Krishna. The childhood ages of Krishna are divided into 3 periods. So you can note this on the slide that I've put up. The beginning of the Kumara age, the middle of Kumara age, and the end of Kumara age. During the beginning and middle of the Kumara age, Krishna's thighs are fatty, and the inner part of his eyes are whitish. There are signs of teeth coming out, and he is very mild and gentle. They're not coming out, they're coming in. He's getting his teeth. He is described as follows, quote, when Krishna had only 3 or 4 teeth coming out in his gums, his thighs were fatty, his body was very, very short, and he began to enhance the parental love of Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda with the activities of his childish body. He was sometimes stepping with his legs again and again, sometimes crying, sometimes smiling, sometimes sucking his thumb, and sometimes lying down flat. These are some of the different activities of the child Krishna. When Krishna was lying down flat, sometimes sucking the toes of his feet, sometimes throwing his legs upwards, sometimes crying, and sometimes smiling, Mother Yashoda, seeing her son in such pastimes, did not show any sign of restricting him, but rather began to watch her child with eagerness, enjoying these childhood pastimes. End quote. You don't see it. So I'm looking at the comments. Kandita says, according to this description, Mother Yashoda is actually bluish in color. Well, actually, there are two descriptions. One is that she's golden and one that she's bluish. And Bhakti says, I don't see the age slide. It's to my left in the corner here of the temple. Do you see it? It's just one slide with the 3 different ages on it. Let me show you, right here. You don't see this right here? This slide, this little right where I'm standing in front of me. You see it now? Okay. Sorry. I couldn't figure out where else to put it. Okay. I didn't want to obscure anybody's vision of the deities or anything. All right, so those are the comments. So, in the beginning of Krishna's Kumara age, there were the nails of tigers set in a golden necklace around his neck. There was protective tilak on his forehead, black mascara around his eyes, and silk thread around his waist. These are the descriptions of Krishna's dress at the beginning of the Kumara age. And these talismans that Prabhupada mentions are little bags of herbs, and she would tie them around his arms, his upper arms. Wonder what herbs she used. Anyway, when Nanda Maharaj saw the beauty of child Krishna with tiger nails on his chest, a complexion like the new grown tamal tree, beautifully decorated tilak made of cow's urine, arm decorations of nice silk thread, and silk clothes tied around his waist. When Nanda Maharaj saw his child like this, he never became satiated by the child's beauty. In the middle Kumara age, the upper portion of Krishna's hair falls around his eyes. Sometimes he is covered with cloth around the lower part of his body. Sometimes he is completely naked. Sometimes he tries to walk, taking step by step, and sometimes he talks very sweetly in broken language. These were some of the symptoms of his middle Kumara age. He is thus described when Mother Yashoda once saw him in his middle Kumara age. His scattered hair was touching his eyebrows, and his eyes were restless. But he could not express his feelings with proper words. Still, when he was talking, it was so nice and sweet to hear. When Mother Yashoda looked at his little ears and saw him naked, trying to run very quickly with his little legs, she was merged into the ocean of nectar. Krishna's ornaments at this age are a pearl hanging from the septum of his nose, butter on his lotus-like palms, and some small bells hanging from his waist. It is stated that when Mother Yashoda saw that the child was moving, ringing the bells on his waist, smiling at her with a pearl between his nostrils, and with butter on his hands, she became wonderfully pleased to see her little child in that fashion. While Krishna was in the middle of his Kumara age, his waist became thinner, his chest became broader, and his head was decorated with his curly hairs, resembling the falling of the wings of a crow. These wonderful features of Krishna's body never failed to astonish Mother Yashoda. At the end of his Kumara age, Krishna carried a small stick in his hand. His clothing was a little longer, and he had a knot around his waist, resembling the hood of a snake. In that dress, he used to take care of the calves near the house, and sometimes he played with cowherd boys of about the same age. He had a slender flute and a buffalo horn bugle, and sometimes he played on a flute made from the leaves of trees. These are some of the symptoms of the end of Krishna's Kumara age. When Krishna was a little grown up and was taking care of the small calves, he would often go near the forest. And when he was a little bit late returning home, Nanda Maharaj would immediately get up on the Chandrashalika, a small shed built on the roof, for getting a bird's eye view all around, and he would watch for him. Worrying about the late arrival of his little son, Nanda Maharaj would remain on the Chandrashalika until he could indicate to his wife that Krishna, surrounded by his little cowherd friends, was coming back with the calves. Nanda Maharaj would point out the peacock feather on his child's head and would inform his beloved wife how the child was pleasing his eyes. Mother Yashoda then addressed Nanda Maharaj, quote, "See my dear son, whose eyes are white, who has a turban on his head, a wrapper on his body, and leg bells which tinkle very sweetly on his feet. He is coming near, along with his Surabi calves, and just see how he is wandering upon the sacred land of Vrindavan." End of quote. Similarly, Maharaj Nanda addressed his wife, quote, "My dear Yashoda, just look at your offspring, Krishna. See his blackish bodily luster, his eyes tinged with a red color, his broad chest, and his nice golden necklace. How wonderful he looks, and how he is increasing my transcendental bliss more and more." End quote. When Krishna, the beloved son of Nanda Maharaj, steps into his Kaishora age, although he becomes more beautiful, his parents still consider him as being in the Paganda age, even though he is between the ages of 10 and 15. When Krishna is in his Paganda age, some of his servants also accept him as being in the Kaishora age. When Krishna performs his childish pastimes, his general practice is to break the milk and yogurt pots, throw the yogurt in the courtyard, and steal the cream from the milk. Sometimes he breaks the churning rod, and sometimes he throws butter on the fire. In this way, he increases the transcendental pleasure of his mother, Yashoda. Pandita is laughing. Oh, sorry, and Greece says his Chinese zodiac is the snake. Mine too. In this connection, Mother Yashoda once told Mukura, her maidservant, quote, "Just look at Krishna, looking stealthily toward all sides and slowly stepping forward from the bushes. It appears that he's coming just to steal the butter. Don't expose yourself, or he may understand that we are looking towards him. I want to enjoy the sight of his eyebrows moving in this cunning way. I want to see his fearful eyes and beautiful face." End quote. In enjoying Krishna's attitude of stealing butter very stealthily, Mother Yashoda experienced the ecstasy of maternal love by smelling his head, sometimes patting his body with her hand, sometimes offering blessings, sometimes ordering him, sometimes gazing at him, sometimes maintaining, and sometimes giving him good instructions not to become a thief. Such activities are in maternal ecstatic love. An important point to be observed in this connection is that the childish propensity of stealing is there even in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore this propensity is not artificial. However, in the spiritual relationship, there is no inebriety to this stealing propensity, as there is in the material world. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 13th chapter, verse 39, Shukadeva Goswami tells King Parikshit, quote, "My dear king, as soon as the elderly gopis saw their sons coming, there was an inexpressible sign of parental love, and all of them became absorbed in affection. At first, they were planning to chastise their sons for stealing butter, but as soon as the sons came before their eyes, they lost all of their angry attitudes and became overwhelmed with affection. They began to embrace their sons and smell their heads. While doing this, they became almost mad after their children." End quote. So this is a quote from the pastime of Brahma stealing the cowherd boys, and Krishna expands himself and substitutes himself as all the boys. And so all the mothers get to have Krishna as their son in secret for a year. So in their childhood pastimes, all these cowherd boys joined with Krishna in stealing butter. But rather than become angry, Mother Yashoda became wet from the milk flowing out of her breasts. Out of her affection for Krishna, she began to smell his head repeatedly. The general activities of all the mothers and cowherd boys were to kiss them, to embrace them, to call them by their names, and sometimes to mildly chastise them for their stealing habits. These manifestations of parental love are called sattvika ecstasy, wherein manifestations of 8 kinds of ecstatic symptoms are visible in full. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 13th chapter, 22nd verse, Shukadeva Goswami tells King Parikshit, and this is more of that uh, episode of Brahma stealing the cowherd boys. So, quote, all the mothers of the cowherd boys were illusioned by the covering influence of the Yogamaya potency of the personality of Godhead. And as soon as they heard the flute playing of their boys, they immediately stood up and mentally embraced their sons, who had been created by the direct internal potency of Krishna. Accepting them as their born sons, they lifted them into their arms and began to embrace them, resting the children's bodies upon their own. The emotions created by this incident were sweeter than nectar, turned into a palatable intoxicant. The milk flowing out of their breasts was immediately drunk up by the children. In the Lalita Madhava, compiled by Rupa Goswami, Krishna is addressed as follows, quote, my dear Krishna, when you are engaged in herding the animals, the dust caused by the hooves of the calves and cows covers your nice face with artistic tilak, and you appear very dusty. But when you return home, the milk flowing out of the breasts of your mother washes your face of its dust covering, and it appears that you are purified by this milk. It is just like when the deity is washed during the performance of the Abhishek ceremony. End quote. I think that's so funny. It is the custom in the temples of deities that if there have been some impure activities, the deity has to be washed with milk. Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, and he was washed by the milk from the breast of Mother Yashoda, which purified him from the dust covering. Sometimes there are examples of Mother Yashoda's becoming stunned in ecstasy. There was exhibited when she saw her son lifting Govardhan Hill. When Krishna was standing, raising the hill, Mother Yashoda hesitated to embrace him and became stunned. The dangerous position that Krishna had accepted by lifting the hill brought tears to her eyes. And with her eyes filled with tears, she could not see Krishna anymore. And because her throat was choked up by anxiety, she could not even instruct Krishna as to what he should do in that position. This is a symptom of becoming stunned in ecstatic love. Mother Yashoda sometimes enjoyed transcendental ecstasy and happiness when her child was saved from a dangerous situation, such as being attacked by Putana or some other demon. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 17th chapter, 15th verse, Shukadeva Goswami says that Mother Yashoda felt very, very fortunate when she got back her lost child. This is part of the end of the Kaliya story when Krishna banishes Kaliya from the Yamuna. Um, she immediately placed him on her lap and began to embrace him again and again. While she was thus embracing her son repeatedly, torrents of tears fell from her eyes, and she was unable to express her transcendental joy. It is stated in the Vidagdha Madhava of Srila Rupa Goswami, quote, my dear Krishna, the touch of your mother is so pleasing and cooling that it surpasses the cooling capacity of the pulp of sandalwood and of bright moonshine mixed with the pulp of ushira root. End quote. Ushira is a kind of root which, when soaked with water, has a very, very cooling effect. It is especially used in the scorching heat of the sun. The parental love of Mother Yashoda for Krishna steadily increases, and her love and ecstasy are sometimes described as intense affection. and sometimes as overwhelming attachment. An example of attachment for Krishna with overwhelming affection is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 6th chapter, 43rd verse, where Shukadeva Goswami addresses Maharaj Parikshit in this way. Oh, we're out of time. Oh, I'm going to finish this paragraph. Quote, "My dear king, when magnanimous Nanda Maharaj returned from a tour, he began to smell the head of his son, and he was merged in the ecstasy of parental love." End quote. A similar statement is there in connection with Mother Yashoda when she was too anxious to hear the sound of Krishna's flute, expecting him back from the pasturing ground. Because she thought it was getting very late, her anxiety to hear the sound of Krishna's flute became doubled, and milk began to flow out from her breast. In that condition, she was sometimes going within the house, sometimes coming out of the house. She was constantly looking to see if Govinda was coming back along the road. When many very great sages were offering prayers to Lord Krishna, glorifying his activities, the queen of Gokula, Mother Yashoda, entered the battlefield of Kurukshetra, wetting the lower part of her sari with the milk flowing from her breast. This entrance of Mother Yashoda at Kurukshetra was not during the battle of Kurukshetra. At other times, Krishna went to Kurukshetra from his paternal home, Dwarka, during the solar eclipse, and at those times, the residents of Vrindavan also went to see him there. Kurukshetra was a holy place before the battle, so people would go there, as it says, for solar eclipses. Well, that's it for tonight, my friends. Thank you so much. Yeah, Kurukshetra is not just known for the battle and the Bhagavad Gita. It's been a sacred place. All right, any questions or other comments? No? All right, so we'll continue this chapter.
Yes, I have a
Yes,
question. You read earlier about Mother Yasoda having a bluish tint.
right.
Um, so does that mean that she's actually bluish in color and not this golden color that she's always painted as having?
So I've been reading the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu simultaneously with this Nectar of Devotion, and there
Mm-hmm.
is some discussion. One place says bluish, and one place says golden, and he just puts that in there and doesn't make any decision either way.
Hmm. Well, you know Radharani is golden,
Right.
but um, yeah, I didn't know that there was a possibility that Mother Yasoda might be actually bluish in color.
Well, since Srila Prabhupada doesn't put that discussion into Nectar of Devotion, I would say that he says she's blue.
Okay. And hey, you know what, too? Well, I heard this to be true that um, Prabhupada said Rukmini actually had red hair. She was Aryan and had red hair and not black. And then the devotees asked Prabhupada about Rukmini and Dwarkadish, the deities in Los Angeles. So Srila Prabhupada, should we change her hair color to red hair color? And he said, no, she's already been installed with black hair, so leave it the way it is.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's some interesting things that we don't know till we go see.
The more we read, the
Yeah,
more we find out. Even though I've read this book like 5 times, every time they're
right.
new, every time. So Bhaktivinoda is saying all kinds of things in chat. He says, um, "There's so much more to this story." Oh, about Kurukshetra, yes. Krishna is many colors too. His deities are different colors too. Yes, his incarnations are different colors. The deities are different colors. But yeah, and in response to the Rukmini having red hair at Los Angeles, Bhaktiville says he was practical. Prabhupada was practical. Yes, always.
Yes.
Had amazing common sense. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. And Sunday
Thank
morning, if
you.
you want to come, Tuesday at 7, that's our schedule. Thank you again. All glories
Thank
to Shri
you.